we don't start doing things a little bit differently. Someone who understands that fully is Mark Goldwine, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And he joins us on the line. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So give us some perspective, just as you watch what's happening in Washington or not happening in Washington, and as you watch those numbers spiral up past $33 trillion. Give us a top-line level, and then we'll kind of break it down.
Our debt is headed to historic levels, record levels, higher than after World War II. Our interest costs are exploding. Inflation is not under control. Major trust funds, including Social Security, are all going to be insolvent within 10 years. And interest rates are rising to way above the growth rate. But other than that, everything in Washington is just peachy.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Yeah.
And it really is that. It is that obvious. And so let's unpack some of those, because I think each of those are really important. One of the things that you mentioned is that the interest that we're paying on that $33 trillion continues to go up, partially because interest rates are going up. But give us a breakdown in terms of what that means and how that reflects or is going to be played out when it comes to funding the government year after year.
Yeah, so I don't think people realize this, but interest is actually the single fastest growing part of the budget. The amount we've spent on interest has almost doubled in the last 3 years, and it's on course to double again in less than a decade. Interest will be larger than what we spend on the Department of Defense as soon as next year, possibly in 2 to 3 years. We already spend more in interest than everything the federal government spends on children. And within 20 years or so, interest is on course to be the single largest government program.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for us to think through, because it's not just that it's larger than those programs, but we also have to look at, we get nothing out of that other than we just pay that interest. It doesn't buy tanks or guns or machinery or things for our troops on the one hand, or anything for social programs or for children on the other. And it's just as if you have your credit card. When you're paying that interest, that's not getting you the car, that's not getting you anything else, it's not buying groceries. It's much more than just the interest alone. It's what we're not able to do as a result.
That's right. It's only a little bit of an exaggeration to say we are now spending more to service the decisions of the past than we are to invest in the future. And it's crowding out everything else. Name the thing you care about: lower taxes, spending on education, spending for low income, defense. It's all being crowded out by this interest that's just going to pay our debt.
And I love that. I love that framing, Mark, in terms of it's inhibiting investment in the future and in the present, things we need to do today. And again, regardless of what your favorite program is or what you think we should or shouldn't be spending on, we can't do any of it because of where we are. And so as you look at that, break it down a little further for us in terms of some of the other programmatic components to this. What else should Congress be talking about in the context of everything that's going on in Washington, just trying to fund it for another year?
Yeah. Well, number one, we actually have to fund the government because we're 2 weeks away from a shutdown. And shutting down the government doesn't save money, it wastes money, because we're still going to pay those federal employees. We're just going to pay them not to work. So we need to fund the government. I think we ought to fund it at the levels we agreed to in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Those are higher than I'd like, but I think we ought to fund it at that deal. And then we need to work to cut spending further in future years. We do need to get both our defense and non-defense appropriations under control. That's number two. Number three, healthcare. We spend more on healthcare in this country than the next largest country by about 50%. There's such an incredible amount of waste that we can lower the cost of Medicare and save money for both the seniors that are on the program and for the taxpayer that's funding it. And then lastly, Social Security. Social Security is only 10 years from insolvency. At that point, the law calls for an automatic across-the-board cut. For a typical new couple, that'll be a $17,000 cut in 10 years. And so we got to save it. And that's going to probably mean more tax revenue going into the program and less spending going out of the program. And we can do it in a smart, thoughtful way, but only if we act soon.
Yeah, and it is. It's that acting immediately that's the real key. We had on a group last week, including Blake Moore, representative here from the state of Utah, talking about the way it works in Washington and actually developing the tools so that they can actually do some data-driven analysis and response in terms of evaluating programs. What is working? What is not working? What is actually producing results? Is it sustainable? And it seems to me, to your point, Mark, that we've just got to start having a different kind of conversation. And we have to be willing to talk about everything, including Social Security and Medicare and defense and all of those other things.
Yeah, the idea that we would take the three largest government programs off the table, Social Security, Medicare, and defense, is bonkers. And the idea that we can't talk about tax revenue and tax breaks, no matter how egregious they are, that's also bonkers. We're not going to fix this problem unless the entire tax code and the entire budget is on the table for review. And then we can decide how to prioritize.
Yeah, and maybe we can call it the Anti-Bonkers Budget Act. How's that? we're now we're now in the naming, because it is bonkers. It is bonkers, and it's magic thinking that if we just keep doing somehow somewhere along the way that everything's going to be made right. You can't do that when you're dealing with $33 trillion and regular deficits that we know have been $1 trillion. This round will be $2 trillion, and who knows where we go from there.
That's right. And some of this magic thinking was assisted by the low interest rates of the last decade.
Yes.
We thought that when borrowing was cheap, that meant borrowing was free. But the politicians failed to consider that if you don't pay that debt back quickly, it gets rolled over into high interest rate debt. And that's exactly what's happening. What we originally borrowed at 2%, we're now rolling over at 5%.
Wow. So as we march forward, as we cruise through this month in particular, what are some of the things you're keeping your eye on that might give us some indication that we can get onto this anti-bonkers approach to the budget?
Well, I mean, the most bonkers thing would be shutting down the government. So the first thing I'm looking for is an agreement to keep the government open. That should be done through the regular appropriations process. But at this juncture, the best bet is what's called a continuing resolution. Just kick the can at last year's funding levels or something like that while we work out the details. That's step one. Beyond that, I think the politicians have two ways to work together. The good way, which is to work together on reducing healthcare costs. There's a promising transparency bill in the House that's a small step in the right direction. Or the bad way, where they trade tax breaks with each other. Democrats get a bigger child tax credit. Republicans get a bigger business expensing tax break. It feels great, except for they don't pay for it with spending cuts. So it just gets added to the company credit card. Yeah,
absolutely. We always say you can't get $33 trillion in debt through conflict. It's through collusion. And that's exactly what you just described. Fantastic insight as always, Mark Goldwein, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And Mark, when we get this bill named, it will have a little asterisk going to your name for the anti-bonkers budgeting bill. It will be in your honor. All right. Fantastic. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's Mark Goldwein. And again, great insight there. We have to start thinking different about all of these numbers because they continue to roll. I think one of the most stunning things that Mark said was that a lot of this money that is part of the national debt, we borrowed at 2%, and now we're having to finance it at 5%. Imagine what that does to how much interest we're paying. Interest payments are preventing us from investing in our future. That's robbing from future generations and preventing us from getting on the right course. Now, we've got to get to a different conversation, and I love the way Mark framed it. We're going to call this the anti-bonkers budgeting bill because we have to get beyond magic thinking. We have to get to practical, tactical thinking so we can actually do the right thing for the country.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. This autumn, fall for the KSL hosts who share this community with you and report on Utah's most important stories. Depend on Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Listen to Dave and Dejanovic at 9, Boyd Matheson at 1, and Jeff Kaplan on the ride home from 3 to 7. We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Zero Res, no residue carpet cleaning and more. The service is top notch. The cleaning is amazing. And here's a price you're going to love too. Schedule today and you'll pay just $25 per room clean. Other companies say they clean as good as Zero Res, but honestly, it's just not the same. Zero Res has patented technology to ensure you get the best cleaning possible. And yes, those patents mean that no one else is cleaning like this. Carpets, air ducts, tile, furniture, and more. Your whole home can be fresher with a call to Zero Res. Today only, they're cleaning the Wasatch Front for just $25 per room. Minimums and restrictions apply, but there are no maximums. Clean 5 rooms, 6 rooms, clean the whole house, just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. $25 per room for carpets, and call for special pricing on air duct cleanings too. For more info, restrictions, and to schedule, visit ZeroRes.com. You got it, ZeroRes.com.
They say you slow down as you get older, and it's true. But taking life a little slower here at Summit Vista has been incredibly rewarding. At my age, I know what I like, and it's all here. They call this a life plan community, and I'm liking the concept. I've always been a practical person, and now it's time to treat myself. At Summit Vista, I have a beautiful apartment. It's spacious and contemporary. It feels like me. I have all the independence I want, no more maintenance headaches, no more days spent cleaning. I eat delicious meals with my friends. The staff here feels like family. The socializing and amenities are endless. Frankly, anyone who says luxury living is overrated hasn't been to Summit Vista. I've rebooted my life, and I'm revisiting my younger self with the wisdom of an older woman. And I gotta tell you, feels pretty cool.
Experience retirement living at the top. Visit summitvista.com today.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, legislative leaders say Utah's national parks need to stay open even if there's a federal government shutdown. Second, 2 major foundations announced plans to build hundreds of affordable housing units, many of them in downtown Salt Lake. And third, President Biden says the world can't afford to let Ukraine be carved up. He was speaking to the UN General Assembly. Right now, 81 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Parents of infants will remember the recent baby formula shortage that had many families desperate to find the formula to feed their babies. Luckily, that shortage has passed. The shelves seem to be stocked. But circumstances that caused that problem to begin with may return quickly if Congress doesn't actually act. So we want to dig into it a little bit beyond the headlines. What caused the formula shortage? What can be done to prevent another one from happening? And really thrilled to have joining us on the program today, Kelly Pierce, of course, former executive producer here at KSL News Radio. She is now the digital media associate at the R Street Institute, our friends over at R Street. And currently, Kelly has a piece at The Hill, thehill.com. Congress must act now to prevent another baby formula shortage. And Kelly joins us on the line. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
So let's dive into your piece on The Hill. And for our listeners who may have put that in the rearview mirror with a lot of the other things that have happened over the course of the year, just give us a quick refresher on what happened, why did it happen relating to baby formula?
Yeah, absolutely. People might wonder, well, why should I care about baby formula right now? But if you look at the news, letter to 3 companies saying their baby formula manufacturing facilities, their quality control, it's not up to snuff. And while it's nice to see the agency actually be proactive, because last time what happened was they were not. There were major problems at these facilities, and they had to shut down multiple times during the year. So we had multiple formula shortages last year. And so however, the FDA's letter just kind of shows us that should these current facilities have to close to fix their quality control, we're going to have another formula shortage again, and parents are going to be running from store to store and begging people on social media to give them formula, and we just can't have that.
Yeah, and we did see that in so many ways. It wasn't just store to store. Sometimes it was country to country of trying to get orders in, doing it on Amazon, doing it on different sites around the world to try to get that formula, especially for those babies with special needs or digestive issues, and that becomes a real threat, a real stressor for those parents.
Absolutely. As people who listen to KSL News Radio might know, I have a son who had a medical issue, and European formula helped him out immensely because they have different ingredients that are less irritating, goat's milk, coconut oil. It's also easier for a pediatrician to understand if a child is having an allergic reaction to something in the formula versus maybe a more serious medical issue. The thing is, with American formulas, they're very standardized, and there's a reason for that. Babies need certain nutrition. However, Europe's been able to figure out different ways of providing that nutrition to babies, yet we really can't access that here because we have these massive tariffs. We also have FDA regulations. So parents like me, we still bought from Europe. We broke the law to do it, but that really shouldn't be the situation. We should be able to have European formulas on American shelves because we had them for months last time and the kids were all right.
Yeah, and so let's look at that in terms of the congressional portion of the program there. You talk about some of those tariffs and some of those regulatory things that are getting in the way of having access to that. We know there's a new bipartisan Formula 3.0 Act. Tell us a little bit of that and where that's headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Formula 3.0 Act would permanently get rid of tariffs on some European formulas. This is to help shore up our supply. As we remember last year, Congress passed the Formula Act that temporarily got rid of those tariffs, and that's why you saw all those European formulas on our shelves. And so sort of the inside baseball for this was when this idea was taken to Senator Lee's office, the reason being he was the lead in passing this temporary legislation last year. There was a lot of work behind the scenes to get a bipartisan, bicameral support to get rid of these tariffs because it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a supply issue. We have a very, very weak supply chain. I mean, unlike anywhere else in the world, the U.S. is vulnerable to supply chain shocks in the baby formula market because we only have a very few producers making up something like 95% of the market. That's insane, and there's so many formulas we could be using.
Yeah, and so as you look at that, again, that bipartisan, bicameral is always the key to get something done there in Congress. And so break that down for us a little bit in terms of the process and what this would actually provide in terms of that kind of stopgap for any kind of future shortage.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of ways that European formula is taken off American shelves. The biggest way is through tariffs. So there's like a 25% tariff, I think, on a lot of European formulas, and that makes them just economically unfeasible, right, to be able to sell on the store shelves that, Kroger or wherever you want to go. However, this bill would take away those tariffs. So that means there'd be a lot more of that European product on the shelves because it would be economically feasible for companies to sell it. It wouldn't have to do what I did, which is basically try to import it black market from Europe, right? And remember, these are formulas that are very safe. Millions of children use them all over the world. They might even have higher standards than American formulas. So it was very important when this legislation was crafted to really get that bipartisan support because you don't want it to, Washington is so polarized, obviously, and you don't want it to be, just the Republicans or just the Democrats working on an issue that's very important to all families to have that safe supply. Yeah.
One of the things that I love that you pointed out in your piece at thehill.com was talking about the fact that, okay, a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, I don't have a child, or I'm not worried about my grandchildren. They're okay. But you actually point out something that's really important. Again, it's beyond the headline stuff, but this does cost taxpayers a lot of money as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So because of these protectionist tariffs, we in the United States, we're really paying on average, the highest formula prices in the world. And guess who is probably the largest buyer of formula in the U.S.? It's WIC. It's these, social programs to help, women and buy formula for their families. And so that means taxpayers are being stuck with millions and millions and millions of dollars in extra costs when that's really not needed.
Yeah, and that's so important because we often don't take it down to that level to say, okay, yeah, we do want to be able to help with WIC, Women, Infants, and Children program.
Absolutely.
That is the biggest buyer of baby formula. And so it is your taxpayer money. It'd be nice to feed more of those infants and those children, being able to do it at a lower cost rather than having these really high things. And it also goes into a lot of the inside baseball in terms of what happens in Washington in terms of lobbying and protection for some of the big businesses around these industries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest proponents of these tariffs is the dairy lobby. And I want to be very clear, this is lobbyists, not family farmers. And they always say, if we have these tariffs, they're going to protect the family farm. Well, here's the problem with that. We've had these tariffs in place for decades, and the family farms across this country are just being decimated. They are closing, even with these tariffs in place. Wisconsin, something in 2019 was something like half the amount of dairy farms that it had at its peak. I have a friend whose family lost their dairy farm in 2018 after generations. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. But these rules and regulations, they're not doing what's intended. We actually have to look at that rule and regulation and say, hey, is this actually doing what we want it to do? But if it's not, then let's change course. Maybe do something like free up markets. Look at FDA regulations that are keeping American products off of European shelves. Maybe stymie production of products, maybe renegotiate trade deals. There's different ways that we can save the family farm without sticking taxpayers with the bill, I think.
Yeah. Great insight as always. Kelly Pierce, the digital media associate with our friends over at the R Street Institute. Kelly, great piece at thehill.com and great work on this is an important one for families, for children, and for all of us as taxpayers. It's one we got to think again about as we roll it all forward. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Thank you, Boyd.
All right. Great insight there. And again, I don't think you woke up this morning thinking about baby formula, but it impacts you. It impacts your family. It impacts your children, your grandchildren, and all of us as taxpayers. And often we lose the right answer in the midst of the politics and the posturing and the influence of the wealthy and the well-connected on that front. So great insight from Kelly Pierce there. We'll step aside for bottom of the hour news, more inside sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. 2 major Utah foundations are working to build 850 affordable housing units along the Wasatch Front over the next 3 years. Crystal Maglet is the CEO of FJ Management, which funds the Call to Action Foundation. They're partnering with Ivory Homes and Ivory Innovations to build affordable condos, apartments, and townhomes in cities like Lehigh, South Jordan, Magna, and Park City.
This is a huge issue, and not only for them, but for many other people in our country. And if we can do our part in our home state to make it easier and more affordable for everyone, that's what we want to do.
60 of those units will come via the old Liberty Wells Center in Salt Lake City. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 4 babies were poisoned by fentanyl at a daycare center in New York City. 3 were treated with the drug Narcan and survived, but a 1-year-old died. DEA agent Frank Tarantino says these are just the latest overdose cases out of thousands that occur every year.
Fentanyl is the most urgent threat in our nation. And the tragedy that unfolded in the Bronx at the Danilo Nino Daycare Center demonstrates the danger that fentanyl poses to every New Yorker.
2 people are in custody, including the daycare operator. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day, 144 points. The NASDAQ down about 44, having recovered a little bit of territory in the past couple of hours. And our KSL weather looks like clouds building up as we get later in the week. We'll see that. We'll see more on that coming up. KSL News Time, 1:31.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in Athira's clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
This is author Richard Paul Evans. My new book, Michael Vey 9, The Trader, is now on sale everywhere. Pick up your copies today. That's Michael Vey 9, The Trader.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meeks.
No problems on the Valley freeways, but we have the final clearing of an auto pedestrian accident in West Valley. This is between 34 and 3500 West, just north of 3500 South. Today only, Zero Res is opening up their $25 special. Schedule your carpet cleaning today, and you'll pay just $25 per room. Only with Zero Res carpet cleaning. Call or schedule online at zerores.com. Ricky Meeks in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today through Thursday with a chance of showers, and there's an increased chance for showers on Friday. High today 83, down to 62 on Friday. Right now we're partly cloudy, 81 degrees. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Get deeper insights on the news from inside sources.
President Biden has spent years building and burnishing his image as a pro-union president. A new report in Politico shows that the president has also spent years building a close relationship with the head of General Motors, one of the major automakers that the United Auto Workers Union is striking against. So you can see the challenges rolling into all of this. Fantastic read today at Politico.com. caught my attention, and I read it all the way through. It shows all the nuances and all the challenges, and we're really pleased to have joining us on the program one of the authors of that, Haley Fuchs, a reporter at Politico covering money and influence in Washington, D.C. And Haley, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You and your tag team partners on this piece, you did some hard work and heavy lifting on this. This is a fantastic, in-depth, nuanced piece. It's not a gotcha piece. It's not any of that. But just kind of give us the baseline in terms of where you started as you started to explore both the president as a very pro-union president and also the relationships he's developed with those that are kind of on the opposite end of the scale when it comes to those union workers.
Certainly. So the CEO of General Motors has been a huge ally of the administration. They've leaned on her and General Motors for the president's electric vehicle and climate change agenda. And there have been few CEOs who have kind of been as kind of public an ally to this administration as the CEO of General Motors. And so we looked at the ties between General Motors and the administration, as well as kind of this tension we see here, whereby, President Biden, is a self-described very pro-union president, and yet he has this close tie with the company that is, very kind of publicly butting heads with the United Auto Workers.
Yeah, and so let's dive into some of that. You mentioned in your piece that the head of GM has made 8 different visits to the White House for meetings. We also know that Barra was a crucial role in terms of kind of the national car charging plan. Give us some essence in terms of what does that relationship look like and how is that becoming problematic for the president?
Certainly. So we know that, the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, spoke to the White House Chief of Staff recently. We know, as you said, that she has visited the White House 8 days since the start of the Biden administration. And so really General Motors, amid the strike, has a kind of unique access to the administration. There's a senior member of the administration whose brother is a lobbyist for General Motors. And so it's kind of an interesting quandary for the administration to kind of be fighting this kind of public image of its closeness to General Motors while also trying to appear very pro-union.
Yeah, and that has been, I think, the challenge for the president, even just over the last few days, is still supporting the striking auto workers. But he hasn't really weighed in, maybe in a way that a lot of people anticipated he might, rolling into what was, foreseen as this looming and pending strike.
Yeah, and I think, there's been tension around this going back, much further than just this current strike. When we think about, the threat of the rail strike and how that led to kind of how the administration is seen when it comes to union issues.
Yeah, and so let's dig into some of the other components. I love the fact that your focus is both on the money and the influence in our nation's capital. And in your piece in Politico, you actually unraveled that a little bit in terms of just how complicated this becomes so quickly, and just kind of give us a sense of that in terms of some of these other players that have connections to President Biden or the administration that is also kind of further complicating how this all will hopefully get resolved soon.
Definitely. And so part of this is obviously a perception issue, is that the administration wants to appear to voters as a pro-union administration. And yet, so Steve Ricchetti, who's a counselor to the president, he is a former lobbyist for General Motors, and his brother currently lobbies for General Motors. The president's niece was actually recently hired by General Motors. And so there are all of these kind of very close connections between the company and the administration. And, in some ways it kind of complicates the appearance that the administration is trying to put forward amid this strike.
Yeah, and so how do you anticipate President Biden takes this in the coming days as you kind of project forward a little bit? How do you see this playing out? What do you see the president's role? Is this going to be more behind the scenes kinds of things because of the complexities of the perception issue? How do you see that playing out?
I think it remains to be seen, but, we're certainly going to see the administration try and appear as pro-union as possible, kind of publicly facing as it kind of navigates this tricky situation.
Yeah, and then as you look at some of those specific pieces, of the puzzle in terms of what the workers are asking for and looking for versus where the company is. And again, part of this goes to kind of the vision and direction. Obviously, GM bet the farm, so to speak, in committing to make the big transition, kind of lead out in that. Give us some kind of a behind the scenes there in terms of what that looks like and what the implications might be.
Well, I think there's kind of an interesting tension here, which is obviously the union workers who want to see the benefits of the EV electric vehicle transition and the companies who are trying to make this transition. And, we're seeing this kind of tension play out on the national stage.
Yeah. And then anything else you're looking for as you kind of monitor that moving forward? Obviously, you've got lobbyists, staffers, the union leaders, the president. You have a whole host of characters there in terms of how this might play out. Anything you're looking at that might give you some indication in terms of, is this going to be a long, protracted, and prolonged strike, or is this something that hopefully moves a little bit swifter?
I think one thing we'd love to see is any inside information into who at GM, if anybody, is speaking with the administration and what those conversations are like. So if any of your listeners have any inside scoops, please give me a shout.
Okay. It is inside sources for a reason, so we will send them your way to be sure. And then final question for you. I'm also really curious. You alluded to this in a couple segments in your piece, and that is how the other big auto companies are reacting to kind of this relationship between GM and the White House. Is that causing more complexities in that? How is that playing out?
I think in terms of how it's playing out, one thing we did talk about is that there have been some other CEOs that have been kind of worried about Barr's relationship with the administration because she is currently the chair of a very powerful association of CEOs called the Business Roundtable. And so obviously, as a company kind of invests in relationships with the administration, if they seem too kind of close to administration, it can complicate things for them if the balances of power change.
Yeah, great insight. And this is going to be one that's going to be just very interesting. And it has all of the palace intrigue that we have become accustomed to in our nation's capital. But great reporting, great writing. Haley Fuchs is a reporter at Politico covering the important stuff, the money and influence in Washington, D.C. Haley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Great perspective there. Man, that is a complicated, nuanced situation when you talk about all of the interconnectedness of some of the key players, from the president of GM to the president of the United States, to lobbyists, to influencers, to family members being employed by. All of that gets very complicated and very difficult for President Biden as he tries to continue to have that pro-labor, pro-worker stance while also dealing with a lot of the insiders and the influence that comes from those companies. We'll continue to monitor all of that here on Inside Sources. We'll step aside for a quick break. More coming up next on KSL News Radio.
This autumn, fall for the KSL hosts who share this community with you and report on Utah's most important stories. Depend on Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Listen to Dave and Dujanovic at 9, Boyd Matheson at 1, and Jeff Kaplan on the ride home from 3 to 7. We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Well, when it comes to SOTA weight loss, you've heard me talk about this before. It just works. The results don't lie. It's my favorite part of this. No one has ever asked me, does it work? Because it works, and the results don't lie. I lost 37 pounds in just 90 days. I'm almost 2 years into my program now, and I'm still there, 37 pounds down. I feel great because it's based on science. You follow the process. You've got your own nutritionist and coach to help you all along the way. You have weekly conversations. You can text at any time if you're concerned or you feel like you're getting off path. It will totally change the way you approach eating to make sure your body gets the right energy, the right resources, the right things it needs to burn to feel good and to have the energy and strength you need to be successful. You've heard me say it before. When it comes to your SOTA weight loss journey, there's no time to lose. There's only time to win. So start winning today. Check it out. The results don't lie. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com, SOTAweightloss.com.
Made to Shine. Real stories from Shane Company customers.
So last week, my boyfriend said, I have a surprise for you. And I totally thought he was going to propose, but it was just tickets to a baseball game.
Then, during the game, Will You Marry Me was up on the big screen, and he was down on one knee holding the most beautiful engagement ring. It was so sparkly.
Our expert jewelers set every center stone by hand, so you'll shine forever. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
Found your dream house but not your dream rate? Make your purchase with a home loan from Cyprus Credit Union. Refinance within 12 months if rates drop, and we'll take care of the refinancing fees. Our team of local home loan experts is here to help you on every step of your home buying journey. Click the ad for more information.
Cyprus Credit Union. Your future is our future.
Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Opportunity Lender, NMLS number 666254.
The Salt Lake Chamber is Utah's voice for business. Okay, that sounds great, but what does it really mean? Well, as Utah's largest and longest standing business association, they support and champion community prosperity throughout the state. And if you're in business, well, that's a very good thing for you. Be sure to listen to the Chamber's Speaking on Business, weekdays at 7:20, 11:55, and 5:20 p.m. on KSL News Radio. Here's a question. Do you wear dentures? At Grandpa's Dental, you can trade in your floppy dentures and get $2,000 towards an implant-supported solution. You know, they say the older you get, the more you need your teeth. Well, chewing your food isn't a luxury. And taking a bite out of a nice, juicy steak, well, it takes teeth. At Grandpa's Dental, they have over 10,000 restorations under their belt, and it's always affordable. When you walk into one of their 3 locations, you're family, period. At Grandpa's Dental, they live their family legacy by building lasting relationships through state-of-the-art services. So if you want to stop the flop and actually eat foods you can chew, trade in your dentures at Grandpa's Dental for $2,000 toward your implant solution. Schedule your free consultation at grandpasdental.com today. That's grandpasdental.com.
This is author Richard Paul Evans. My new book, Michael Vey 9, The Trader, is now on sale everywhere. Pick up your copies today. That's Michael Vey 9, The Trader.
Even before the pandemic, 1 in 5 American adults experience some form of mental illness, depression, suicide, prescription opioid misuse. Utah isn't immune to our share of challenges, but there is hope. We need to take action to keep our loved ones safe. That's why KSL has teamed with the University of Utah Huntsman Mental Health Institute to bring you hope and help you thrive. It's Healthy Mind Matters. Find out more at healthymindmatters.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, 2 foundations planning to build more than 800 units of affordable housing in Utah. Second, the Utah Taxpayers Association says Utahns pay more in taxes than most other neighboring states. Third, 3 babies survived fentanyl poisoning at a daycare center in New York City thanks to quick treatment with Narcan, but a 1-year-old child died. Right now, 81 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City, and back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. I am Boyd Matheson. Earlier today, Brigham Young University inaugurated its 14th president of the university, C. Shane Reese. And it was a powerful ceremony full of conviction, new beginnings. President Reese laid out his vision for the future of one of Utah's bastion of education and faith. I thought it was really stirring and telling that you had a president of, you could say, a rival university. Taylor Randall from the University of Utah was in attendance. Astrid Tuminez from Utah Valley University, among other dignitaries. And then, of course, you had President Dallin H. Oaks, Elder Ronald A. Rasband, and Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were all in attendance as well and part of that ceremony. And I want to go through some of that because I think it tells us so many important things, both about higher education and the role of faith in our communities. Elder Christofferson introduced President Reese and inaugurated him. He talked about his love of the study of statistics. President Reese is a statistician by trade and by background, and I think his natural way of thinking. Elder Christofferson pointed out that President Reese, being a statistician, is what helps him make him the right man for the job right now.
You are all aware of President Reese's extensive background in statistics. It's said that his depth of knowledge and love for, some would say fixation on, statistics has enabled him to spark excitement for the subject, even in newcomers. He calls statistics, quote, decision-making in the presence of uncertainty. If that is so, Shane Reese is certainly the man for the job. I say that because of the many uncertainties of our times. There's widespread disagreement in our society about the value of long-standing institutions such as religion, marriage and family, constitutional government, and even higher education. The role of these and other institutions in modern society and the values that have long sustained them are being questioned by those who seem willing to ignore not only their spiritual significance, but the considerable empirical evidence for their essential role in human flourishing. This raises one of the central challenges of our day, what President Dallin H. Oaks has described as the need to stand for truth with love.
Great perspective there on President Shane Reese as he takes the mantle there as the 14th president of BYU. And this idea that statistics is really about decision-making in the presence of uncertainty. Elder Christofferson also talked about that in uncertain times that we are clearly in, the place to start is with what is certain. And so that focus, talking about institutions, community, all of those things that do create certainty in our lives and in our communities, in our state, in our country, those are all the places where we need to begin. I thought that was an important part of the messaging today, that this decision-making in the presence of uncertainty. And President Reese will certainly have that opportunity as the president of BYU. For his part, President Reese started his inaugural address by introducing the slogan, Becoming BYU, as a central part of his vision for the university moving forward. That Becoming BYU is, of course, living up to many of the predictions of what BYU would or could become, made by previous church leaders and presidents, and involves improving all aspects of campus life and administration. And he began where I think he should begin, with starting on student flourishing.
Becoming BYU will require enriching the student experience and strengthening our already student-centric approach. President Worthen helped us focus resolutely on students. He championed inspiring learning both in the classroom and through internships, study abroad programs, and research with faculty mentors. Each student's eternal progression must remain our foremost concern. To this end, we strive for every student to have an inspiring learning experience.
According to President Reese, another part of Becoming BYU involves the church's emphasis on the university's religious mission, empowering professors to engage in the language of scholarship as well as the language of faith.
Becoming BYU will require that we embrace our religious mission, even as we speak to the broader academy with credibility and strength. This faculty has a double heritage. The faculty and staff who foster this double heritage must be bilingual. They must speak with authority about their disciplines in the language of scholarship, and they must speak with power about their Christian discipleship in the language of faith.
I think it's an important double heritage, being bilingual in scholarship and faith. Those are both important languages, I think, for the founding and mission of Brigham Young University, and I think it's one that I think many institutions around the country, not just higher education, have lost in the process, as in many places faith has been pushed out or nudged out or elbowed out of the public square. And when we have an absence of that, we miss out on many of the nuanced conversations that actually lead to better results, better research, better outcomes. President Reese said that if necessary, BYU must be courageous enough to stand alone in amplifying its unique educational and religious mission.
Becoming BYU will require at times the courage to stand alone. Like our colleagues at other religious institutions, we exert our strength only to the extent that we embrace and enhance our religious identity. We must differentiate ourselves within the scope of our university work, not independent of that work.
So differentiate the scope of the university work, not to become independent of that dual role in terms of education and religious mission. And then finally, rounding things out, President Reese spoke on the importance of BYU to empower discussions, to create a welcoming atmosphere, and cultivating peacemakers to help forge a brighter future.
For all who enter our doors, a BYU education should be spiritually strengthening, intellectually enlarging, character building, and it should lead to a life full of learning and service. This is a critical time in the history of Brigham Young University. Unfortunately, we work against a societal backdrop where discussion and dialogue are being replaced by contention and monologue. As we embrace our unique institutional identity, we will foster at BYU a unique learning environment that will empower us to be peacemakers in an ever more divisive society.
I love that conclusion from President Reese as he rounded out the festivities there as he was inaugurated as the 14th president of Brigham Young University. This idea that in a societal backdrop that is ever more divisive, ever more heated in terms of rhetoric, that it was the job of the institution and all those that are in it, from students to faculty to administration, to be peacemakers in a divisive society. I think that's an important invitation, especially as we look at what is happening on different college campuses around the country. It's anything but peacemakers, rarely even peacekeepers, and peacemakers really is the answer to the question. One of the things that I found, of course, we had President Reese on the program right after he was named as the next president of BYU. And one of the things that I love, in addition to his statistical mind, which does, going back to where we began, help him really navigate very uncertain times. It's decision-making in the presence of uncertainty. But one of the things that I found most compelling about President Reese was his curiosity, that he wants to learn, that he wants to not just get the top-line numbers, he wants the underneath numbers. He wants to see the work and to see the process and the questions that got asked and the deliberations that took place. And I think that'll be a great asset to him as he continues to lead a historic and storied institution, as he leads it into a new chapter, an important one, I think, in terms of higher learning in general. And so we congratulate President Shane Reese as the 14th president of Brigham Young University, an important commencement start, beginning for the university today, a new season. And we'll continue to follow many of the things that happen there as well. Well, that rounds out hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We've got a big hour number two coming up, including what I think is one of the most compelling speeches I've heard in a long time from President Zelensky at the UN. Stick around. We'll be back.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen at home on any smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM. This is KSL News Radio, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. The Utah Taxpayers Association is out with its annual report comparing the taxes Utahns pay to the nation and surrounding states. President Rusty Cannon says our property taxes tend to be lower, but others make up the difference.
But when you add in sales tax, income tax, all the state and local taxes that taxpayers pay, our rank is pretty poor, actually.
Cannon says we pay an average of 2.4% more in taxes than the rest of the country, 3.3% more than other western states. The Navajo Nation is citing cultural beliefs in closing Monument Valley during the annular eclipse next month. The Institute for Diné Culture, Philosophy, and Government says for the Diné people, the eclipse is a time for prayer and reverence, reflecting on the ending of phases of life. The tribal park along the Utah-Arizona border will be closed for at least 5 hours during the eclipse on October 14th. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden in New York participating in the United Nations General Assembly with other world leaders. The president holding a number of meetings on the site as well, including a summit with leaders of several countries in Central Asia.
I'm genuinely looking forward to following up on this meeting because we are stronger, and I genuinely believe the world is safer when we stand together, our 5 nations.
The president meeting with leaders from Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And those countries face pressure from China as well as Russia. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day, 106 points right now. The NASDAQ is down 32. And just ahead, our KSL weather. Looks like it's going to be clouding up. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
Because we have had the Connecticut soft water system in our home for years and years, as a matter of fact, 2 different homes, I can tell you that it really is so much better than other water softeners, hands down. I love it because it makes a bag of salt last 3 times longer than the systems of competitors. It gives you wonderful, luxurious soft water you can count on 24/7. And when you're dealing with these folks, you're going to love. You'll find out that there are no nonsense, no loopholes, 10-year warranty. You feel like you've really found friends, and you find yourself really in soft water heaven. Connecticut of Utah. If your system doesn't sound like the one I just described, I want you to call Monty. I want you to call Steve. The great people, all of them there at Connecticut will take care of you. 801-576-8600, or go online at softwaterutah.com.
Jeff Kaplan.
His Minute of News is great. It's always entertaining.
I listen to Jeff Kaplan every day. He gives you important news and traffic and the familiar voice that helps you enjoy the ride home.
I really like Jeff's Minute of News. He's calm and he's balanced.
I really enjoy driving home and just listening to what he's got to say.
Jeff Kaplan gets me home every day.
Join the community that relies on Jeff Kaplan. He has you covered. Afternoons from 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
Exergen is the smart choice when selecting a thermometer. As children return to school, keeping them healthy is important. Got a fever? Stay home. To detect fever accurately at home, you need a fast, non-invasive, and clinically accurate thermometer. Exergen provides all of that and is backed by over 100 clinical studies. Accuracy matters. Be smart and safe. Measure temperature accurately with Exergen. Learn more at Exergen.com.
This is author Richard Paul Evans. My new book, Michael Vey 9, The Trader, is now on sale everywhere. Pick up your copies today. That's Michael Vey 9, The Trader.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Nice and quiet on the Valley freeways, lighter than normal traffic at times. So you're good to go whether you're traveling I-15, 215, I-80, or the 201. No accidents to report whether you're on the freeways or main secondaries. Is your car due for some extra love? Burt Brothers is here for your vehicle's routine maintenance, all done by our ASE certified technicians. Burt Brothers, affordable, complete auto care done better. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, looks like we're going to have about a 30% chance of rain for the next day or two. Then by Friday, that goes up to about 50%. And the temperature drops into the 60s by the time we get to Friday. Right now, we're at 81 degrees, partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
One of the big headlines of the day, of course, President Biden in New York City for the United Nations General Assembly, with all kinds of serious issues facing the United States and all of those partners in the room. War, food shortages, climate change, a host of other things. So we want to go beyond just what was the high-level message for the president, what was the underlying message or the nuanced message, and what were the other messages that may have happened in the hallway or in some of those side meetings. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, to help us go beyond just the headlines, of course, we always turn to Olivier Knox, national political correspondent and anchor of the Daily 202 at the Washington Post. And you've heard me say it before, it is where your day should begin if you want to get good perspective beyond the headlines. And Olivier, welcome back to the show. Did we lose Olivier? Oh, we've lost Olivier for just a moment. Hopefully we'll get him back here. Okay, he dropped. So while we're waiting for Olivier to get dialed back in, the president was at the United Nations today. This is one of those speeches that I think will be better read than said. The president wasn't particularly sharp in terms of his delivery today. That's always a hard setting at the UN. The format is a little sideways sometimes. It's difficult to get a good read on the teleprompter. And I think the president struggled with that a little bit, but there are some great moments and components to that speech that I think are really important to dig into. Now I think we have Olivier back. And Olivier, I was just saying that I think from the president's speech standpoint, it's one of those speeches that would be better read than said, than just listening to it. I don't think the president was particularly sharp, but if you read it, there's some great and important messages in there. What was your top line takeaway?
Well, I try to look at sort of what was motivating what President Biden was saying, because obviously the headlines are about, renewed, sustained support for Ukraine as it tries to beat back Russian forces. That was obviously one of the headlines there. But what I thought was interesting was the extent to which he reached out to the so-called global south, what we used to call the developing world, and really tried to tell them that their priorities are America's priorities, that America is a partner, that America wants to work with them on sustainable development, that America wants to work with them to battle the climate crisis, that America wants to work with them to reform international institutions like the United Nations, where, for example, Brazil has sought a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. So a lot of his speech was reaching out directly to all of those countries. And I think the reason's fairly obvious. On the one hand, a lot of them have declined to support sanctions against Russia. They are war-weary. They are facing some of the worst effects of the conflict, whether it's food shortages or skyrocketing fuel costs. And the other is that the United States is locked in a global rivalry with China that a lot of them have also declined to join. And so this was a real, in some ways, this was sort of a charm offensive or maybe even retail politics by the president on the global stage.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of those countries that are dealing with those shortages of whether it's fuel or food or whatever it may be. And I wanted to get into the China component to it. The president did say, hey, we're not trying to chop everything up or be totally against China. We have to work together on a lot of things. But he did get a few little things in there and maybe some of that nuanced messaging towards some of those in the South that were kind of the beginning of his speech.
Right. I mean, when he said that the United States is looking to de-risk when it comes to China, not decouple, that's effectively a message to folks that they don't actually need to pick a side. That the United States is taking steps to protect its supply chains. We all learned in the pandemic what happened when the United States relied heavily on China for everything from medicine to personal protective equipment, that stuff. Yeah. So the way I read that is as a way of saying, we're not asking you to choose between us, which is an important message because for a lot of these countries, that's really not an option.
Yeah, and I think that's an important nuance piece to get to, because it really has been kind of an either or. We know the president was in Vietnam recently, kind of doing that same thing. Vietnam, obviously very dependent and has had a long history with China and obviously our neighbors. And the president saying, look, it doesn't have to be either or. There can be a different way to go about it. I think it's a really interesting message to be getting at.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, because if he did sort of deliver some kind of an ultimatum on either or, whether it comes down to Russia or it comes down to China, he would find that some of the most resistant countries are some of America's closest partners. You know, the Germans and the Chinese have a close economic relationship. You know, ditto the French and the Chinese. The Germans for a while had a deep economic relationship with Russia. Obviously, that's changed a lot in the last couple of years, but if he served any kind of an ultimatum, he would probably lose an awful lot of support from the international community.
Yeah, and then, of course, a crucial piece of it, and I think one of the stronger points of the president's speech did deal with Ukraine and looking at those connections. And as you said, it's sort of this delicate dance of trying to navigate all of that. But I thought the president was strong in that space and also kind of sending that message to Vladimir Putin in terms of where the world needs to be.
Yeah, I thought the interesting part of the Ukraine message was to say, you know, you've all signed on to the UN Charter. The UN Charter recognizes sovereignty. If you let Russia gobble up parts of Ukraine, or who knows, all of Ukraine, then what's to stop your regional power from deciding that it can gobble you up, in effect? Now, there's an irony to that, of course, which is that when Biden invokes the rules-based international order, the United States has rather happily violated the rules-based international order in the name of our national security. But still, you know, what he's saying, in effect, is if Ukraine's not safe, none of you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing for all of those nations to be noodling on and thinking about. Give us some perspective, and you hit a little bit of this in the 202 in terms of kind of the campaign mode for the president. Obviously, some things he has to bolster there. What did you see on the political front? How'd that play out?
Well, so obviously, when he delivers the message that his America is a partner, it's sort of a direct rebuke to the America First policy of Donald Trump. I will pause here and say that every president I've ever covered is America First. It's just that they go about it in a different way. But I thought that in terms of the politics, you know, one of the interesting things is he's mixing these kinds of events, the UN General Assembly speech, for example, with evening fundraisers where he's telling Democratic donors, you know, why he should be reelected. And in one reception earlier this week, he actually went on something of a long riff about foreign policy and talked about how long he's done foreign policy and talked about being in Vietnam and talked about how many meetings he's had with foreign leaders. And that seems in part to be a direct response to the news media coverage about concerns regarding his age. In effect, what he's saying is, sure, you're using age as a stand-in for inability. And here are all the things that I have actually done. And, you know, this White House is still kind of wrestling with how to tackle what we agreed to shorthand as the age question. And that seemed like a pathway for him to address it.
Yeah. And then finally, Olivier, before I let you go, anything surprise you either out of the speech or some of the sidebar meetings going on? And what are you going to be watching for moving forward?
Well, no significant surprises, no big new initiatives from the president. I thought that he did give sort of a nod to the war weariness in the global south, but without saying that was a reason to pressure Ukraine into giving up land, but just sort of he did a nod. What I'm watching for right now is what kind of reception the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gets when he comes down to Washington. I don't have a lot of doubts about how he gets received at the White House. I don't have a lot of doubts about how he gets received in the Senate. But House Republicans have increasingly called for an end to economic and military aid to his country. And so it'll be interesting to see how they respond to his visit.
Yeah, great insight, great reporting as always. Olivier Knox, national political correspondent and anchor of the Daily 202 at the Washington Post. Olivier, as always, appreciate your perspective and insight. Thanks for making time for us today.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks.
All right, that's Olivier Knox from the Washington Post. And again, beyond the headlines of the president visiting New York today, United Nations General Assembly gave a speech. I think if you go back and read the speech, I found that more compelling than listening to the president on this occasion, but some important messaging, especially for kind of those in the South, in South America, some of these other countries, some of the African nations who are really feeling divided in terms of, do we have to choose the U.S. or China? That's complicated, and I think President Biden was rightly saying, look, there's a way to get around this, and that we can have a nuanced and a different kind of conversation. To me, that was the really compelling part of the day, that it is obviously a challenge with China, but it's about de-risking, not decoupling from. That would be the key for a lot of these nations that have been dependent on China for a very long time. There has to be a path forward for them, and hopefully the president can convince some of them to see that America as a partner is a far better way to go.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
I lost 34 pounds on the SOTA weight loss program. You might have heard us talking about this before. I had done every program there is, almost. And some of them I had lost weight on, but then I gained it right back, which was so frustrating. Because if you're going to go through this and lose 34 pounds or more in some cases, you don't want to ever have to do this again.
Yeah.
SOTA weight loss teaches you how to be smart. I thought I was eating healthy. I just didn't know. I didn't know that certain kinds of things, turn to carbs, and body fat just like that. They taught me so much, and I still talk to my nutritionist.
That's the key right there, is that you're never alone. And sometimes when you're the only one in your own household dieting, you feel like you are really all out there on an island by yourself. You never feel like that with SOTA, because they have these great nutritionists who become friends, and they know where you have your struggles, and they can help you get right back on task when you do gain a couple of pounds along the way. Find out more. Go to SOTAweightloss.com. See how my daughter lost 42 pounds. It's SOTA Weight Loss. State of the art.
Every business deserves a great deal. That's why, for a limited time, we're launching the Mobile Made Free event. With Comcast Business Internet, new and existing customers can get 1 year of unlimited mobile for free. Yep, you heard that right. An entire year, free. It's our best internet, powered by the next generation 10G network and with 99.9% reliability, plus 1 line of free mobile for a year. The Mobile Made Free event is happening now.
Get started with internet and advanced security for $49.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Plus, for a limited time only, ask how new and existing customers can get a free line of unlimited mobile during the Mobile Made Free event. Call or go online today to learn more. Ends 9/21/2023. EcoBill and autopay required. New 50 megabits per second internet and Security Edge customers only. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. Mobile offer requires 100 megabits per second internet package and new unlimited intro mobile service. Other restrictions apply.
I feel like I'm constantly cleaning hair off my bathroom floor. At least my Swiffer sweeper makes it easy. Sweeper heavy-duty dry cloths have ultra-thick pads to trap and lock hairs, like a hair magnet. And when I'm finished cleaning up my hair, Sweeper takes care of his too. Now the hair's gone, all thanks to Swiffer. Try Swiffer Sweeper heavy-duty dry cloths. I promise you'll love them or your money back. And also try Swiffer Sweeper Wet to make quick work of tough, sticky messes.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
Get Mr. Max Performance Missionary Package. 1 performance suit, 4 and collar stretch shirts, 3 ties, 1 mission belt, and 1 pair of Echo or Johnston & Murphy shoes. Just $595.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
There's been much discussion of late regarding hostage diplomacy in the United States, particularly with the hostages that were freed from Iran, along with $6 billion of frozen assets. And, of course, that's an important component in terms of American diplomacy and positioning around the world. And yet, in the midst of all of that, I think we've missed some of the crucial part of the conversation. It's one of those where we so often chase the headlines, but miss a lot of the things underneath. And someone who has really helped to resharpen the focus in terms of what kind of conversations we should be having is Sahar Soleimani, a research associate at the American Enterprise Institute, had a great piece in The Hill. A year after Mahsa Amini's death, America's Iran policy is status quo. And Sahar, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to discuss this really important issue.
So I want to start with Mahsa Amini's death, because I think for so many in the kind of the rush of hostages being freed, which is always a great celebration. We'll get into the details of that in a moment. But take us back in terms of why Mahsa Amini's death, the anniversary of that, is so important, and what we actually missed in the chase of some of these other headlines.
Yeah, so to provide some background information, on September 16th of last year, Mahsa Amini died in the custody of Iran's so-called morality police for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. And her murder sparked one of the biggest protest movements in the history of the Islamic Republic. And at the height of the protest, I think there were many people, including myself, who hoped that this would lead to a tougher U.S. stance towards Iran, especially since the protest actually put the nuclear negotiations on pause indefinitely. When the news broke in August, though, that the U.S. and Iran are moving forward with this hostage deal in which the U.S. agreed to release $6 billion in frozen funds from South Korea to Iran in exchange not only for the release of 5 U.S. hostages, but also Iran would be getting back 5 hostages that were incarcerated in U.S. prisons, it became very clear to me that this administration has no interest in getting tough on Iran. If anything, we're incentivizing its rogue behavior. And to have this deal happen on the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death, it's a huge slap to the face of the people of Iran who have been risking their lives in the name of freedom, democracy, gender equality, right to choose, all values that we've professed as a country to hold dear, but that we put at stake with this deal.
Yeah, I think that's there are so many components to that I want to make sure we unpack. One, that last statement you made, and you cover this in your piece at The Hill, talking about this really being an insult to those brave people inside of Iran who have been standing up for freedom, for the ability to express themselves, to do so many different things. And it just seems a little tone deaf to the administration. That one, we have really not changed our stance hardly at all, and if in many cases made it worse, I think, in terms of the interaction with Iran. What else do you see in that, and what else are you hearing in terms of reaction within the country as it relates to that?
So I do want to preface this by saying that hostage diplomacy has no good outcome. There will never be a situation in which the U.S. doesn't lose some leverage over an adversary in exchange for something that they want back. Unfortunately, that's just the price we pay for dealing with nations that don't abide by international law. And we should absolutely be rejoicing at the return of 5 innocent Americans. I mean, I watched a video of them coming off the plane tarmac in Doha and got chilled. But I think the fundamental issue that everyone is having here is with the terms under which the deal was negotiated. So we need to get out of the habit of offering financial concessions to Iran in exchange for prisoners. So like I say in my piece, the hostage for money scheme is an integral part of Iran's foreign policy strategy, and their senior officials have admitted to holding Americans captive in order to fund their economy. So when we continue to offer Iran lots of cash for taking innocent Americans hostage, it essentially tells the Iranians, hey, this is a really lucrative business model. Let's keep doing it. So it becomes a revolving door scenario that we perpetuate because the regime is now incentivized to continue holding Americans hostage for ransom. And the bottom line here is that ransom deals are fundamentally at odds with our government's responsibility to ensure the security of U.S. citizens.
Yeah, and there's no question that so many have said, wait a minute, if we're exchanging 5 lives for 5 lives plus $6 billion, that just seems so counter to everything we're professing to believe anyway, in terms of some of those founding principles and ideals. One of the things that you mentioned that I wanted to get to is, how do we actually adopt a different kind of stance? How do we send better and more clear messages to the regime, and what kind of relationship, what kind of interactions we should have moving forward?
So I think there are a number of measures that we can publicly adopt to send a clearer message to Iran that in the future this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. And a lot of these penalties require working with our allies and partners in order to isolate Iran from the international community and not just the U.S. So some of those things include committing to stronger sanctions and reinforcement beyond just imposing designations on officials who are responsible for the hostage taking. So, for example, we have lax enforcement of terrorist-related sanctions on Iranian oil, which has allowed Iran to actually net billions and billions of dollars in smuggling revenue. Additionally, Iran has been sending weapons to Russia in their war against Ukraine, and those Iranian airlines that are used to ship UAVs to Russia also operate commercial flights to several European airports. So we should be imposing sanctions on these airlines and working with the European counterparts to ban them from using their airports. There are also a couple of diplomatic penalties that we can enforce. So Iranian ambassadors and diplomats could be recalled, any travel by regime officials to foreign countries should be restricted. The family members of regime officials who live and work and infiltrate Western education systems should be sent back to Iran. I mean, Iran's president, Raisi, is currently in New York for the UN General Assembly. And as an organization that is supposed to protect human rights, he should not have been allowed to come to the United States to attend that event. And then finally, we can institute a total travel ban on all American citizens to Iran. This obviously wouldn't solve the problem completely, since dual citizens would technically still be allowed to travel, but it would at least reduce the number of Americans traveling and significantly cut opportunities for the regime to take Americans hostage.
Yeah, the images from the UN meetings were chilling to me to think, wait a minute, what? This seems so counter to everything that's being said, everything that's being proposed here when it comes to human rights in particular. I understand you have to have diplomacy and you have to engage with the enemy on certain things, but this was just one, again, that was sort of that slap in the face moment of, wait a minute, do we really live up to the principles we profess to believe? And one of the things that you concluded your piece with that I wanted to get to, Sahar, was this whole idea of really wondering or second guessing, is the United States really committed to this, and what messages are we sending? And I think that applies not only to those inside of Iran, but I think in that whole region and all around the world. That has to create questions of what are we really all about in this?
Yeah, I mean, as I say in my piece, authoritarianism is on the rise, and this kind of behavior is such a really bad example for, other adversaries. So Russia is watching, China is watching, and they'll see this as a point of American vulnerability and essentially try to replicate what Iran is doing. It doesn't have to be hostage-taking in particular, but just any way to take advantage of the United States. Like, they see now that, there are pressure points that they can pick on.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting challenge that we really have to get to. If we're going to look at a real foreign policy, again, Iran and otherwise, in terms of really establishing some of those benchmarks, because I do think that trickles and spreads out around the world, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's North Korea, and a whole lot of other regimes around the world. If they sense that there are, as you said, I love the way you said that, Sahar, those pressure points, if they think they can leverage those pressure points, then those authoritarian regimes are always going to have the upper hand.
Exactly. And in this age of global power competition, that's not the message we want to be sending.
Yeah. And so finally, as we close out, give us a final thought to both in terms of where we go from here, how we properly not just commemorate or memorialize Mahsa Amini's death, but how do we use that to actually drive forward some change and a different kind of discussion?
It's tough because you don't want to completely disengage from talking to Iran because, you do want to make sure that they're not engaging in terrorist activities or, funding their proxies and allies abroad or, repressing their citizens at home. But you also want to make sure that you're not tone deaf to certain things going on in the country. So I think the problem with this particular deal was that it happened so close to Mahsa Amini's death. And so I think we need to take a step back and, assess the situation in Iran and just hold them accountable for the things that they're doing to their people. So instead of rewarding them for their bad behavior, we should, continue to penalize them.
Yeah, the rewarding bad behavior never leads to good things, whether it's with your children or whether it's with a foreign regime. It just never ends well, for sure. But I think this is such a crucial part of the conversation. The piece in The Hill is fantastic. You should check that out, thehill.com. A year after Mahsa Amini's death, America's Iran policy is status quo. Sahar Soleimani is a research associate at the American Enterprise Institute. And Sahar, we really appreciate you making time for us today. This is great insight. This is sobering and important things for us to think about as we try to march things forward for freedom all around the world. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great speaking with you.
More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Utah's two top legislative leaders say they won't let Utah's national parks close down if the federal government shuts down.
We do not want our national parks to shut down. President Adams and I were in legislative leadership back the last time. I'm sure that we will get together with our leadership teams and respond appropriately. We have got rural Utah and these towns around these national parks that depend tremendously on the economies related to tourism.
House Speaker Brad Wilson says the last time this happened, though, Utah didn't get paid back by the federal government. Most of the Great Salt Lake's water levels still in better shape than they were last year. The North Arm, though, is once again nearing record lows. Ben Steierman with Utah's Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands says there's a reason why they're working to get more water in the South Arm.
The North Arm doesn't support the same ecosystem that the South Arm does. So that in itself is a really strong and compelling reason to preserve the South Arm as much as we can and those salinity levels.
And the North Arm of the lake is so salty it forms a natural barrier to the toxic dust in the lake bed. Steierman says the North Arm's levels haven't fluctuated much, while the South Arm of the lake is about 4 feet higher than it was last year. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Along with all the other world leaders in New York today for the UN General Assembly, Prince William was in New York for the Earthshot Prize Innovation Summit. The heir to the British throne announced the 2023 Earthshot Prize finalists.
An important part of the prize's design and development is that not just to provide the solutions, but it's the fact to make people believe there is hope and there are people out there doing incredible things that will have a massive impact on our futures.
Prince William is the founder of the Earthshot Prize, designed to recognize innovation in protecting the environment. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing the trading day down 106 points. The NASDAQ was down 32. The S&P 500 down about 10 points. And coming up, it looks like our weather will get a little cloudier and maybe a little wetter toward the end of the week. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Hi, this is Doug Wright, and there are good things in the air. You can feel it, you can see it, you can experience it. Football, the kids are back in school. It's beginning to cool off a little bit. Fall is in the air, and a great place to go this fall for the best meal you've ever had. It's Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Now let's talk about going up to the mountains where the leaves are just beginning to turn. It's going to be gorgeous. And at Hotel Park City, there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse waiting for you. So many things are going on in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City, and there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse downtown for you as well at 275 South West Temple. That steak that you've been longing for, cooked to perfection, the perfect temperature, the side dishes, the desserts. They're at both locations of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. So call and make your reservations now. When Dee and I ate there the other night, it was so delicious, so good. That first bite, you're going to love it at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Ron had a tax problem he just couldn't handle on his own.
I owed the IRS taxes for over 5 years, but I didn't have any money to pay the taxes.
Those years cost him dearly.
Most of it was fees and interest. It was horrible.
Ron finally called in the pros.
I called Optima Tax Relief, and boy, am I happy I did.
The leading tax resolution firm, Optima, is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. They've resolved over $1 billion for their clients. Ron was overjoyed.
They settled my account with the IRS. I was ecstatic. They are a lifesaver. They are. I am so happy.
Take Ron's advice and call Optima now for a free consultation.
Yeah, don't do like I did and wait. Call Optima Tax Relief. Do it now. You'll be ecstatic like me.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Maximize your energy savings with a new energy-efficient heating and cooling system from Yes, and you could save up to $4,500 through possible tax credits and other discounts. Purchase a new system today, and Yes will buy back your old inefficient HVAC system. Visit theyesmancan.com to schedule your appointment. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
This is author Richard Paul Evans. My new book, Michael Vey 9, The Trader, is now on sale everywhere. Pick up your copies today. That's Michael Vey 9, The Trader.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meeks.
It's a nasty accident in Davis County, southbound Highway 89 to go to either southbound I-15 or Legacy Parkway. They're now starting to let a little bit of traffic go through, only one lane though, and this crash is right under an overpass. They're trying to get it moved out of traffic again. A single file of traffic through the center lane going through. Also an accident northbound I-15 in Midvale at 7200 South on the shoulder. With over 30 plus specialties and multiple locations across Utah, Revere has you covered for all your health needs. Revere Health, your partner in health, your partner for life. Online at reverehealth.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather looks like it's going to be about a 30% chance of showers today, tomorrow, the next day. Then by Friday, that chance goes up and more clouds move in. Right now, we're at 81 degrees, partly cloudy skies. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we've been covering, world leaders, including President Joe Biden, are in New York today for the UN General Assembly. One of the most powerful speeches of the day came from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. President Zelensky began his speech talking about the UN's goal of preventing a third world war. Many of them thought a third world war would begin with nuclear weapons, and so leaders have placed restrictions on the use of those weapons. But Zelensky said that Russia isn't using nuclear weapons, it's weaponizing a host of other things. This was a compelling speech. President Zelensky delivered it in its entirety in English, and his English has gotten much better. And it's interesting, I am certain he has been working on that, recognizing the audience, knowing that the real key are the resources from many of these nations in order for Ukraine to be able to continue the fight to push Russia out of their sovereign territory. And again, President Zelensky, who came on the world stage a few years ago without much fanfare and very little notice, was not known or understood or perceived as any kind of leader until the fighting really began. And he has shown himself to be both gritty and powerful in his use of words and visuals. And so I want to go through this speech. This was a compelling speech. And you all know I love a good speech. This was an extraordinary speech. I think it was the best speech of the day at the UN. And so let's start with that. President Zelensky began by explaining how Russia is weaponizing the food market.
Since the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian ports in the Black and Azov Seas have been blocked by Russia. Until now, our ports on the Danube River remain the target for missiles and drones. And it is a clear Russia's attempt to weaponize the food shortage on the global market in exchange for recognition for some, if not all, of the captured territories.
President Zelensky went on to say that not only was Russia weaponizing food and food instability, not just for the Ukrainians, but for others around the world, but that Russia was also weaponizing nuclear power plants.
Look, please, what Russia did to our Zaporizhia power plant. Shelled it, occupied it, and now blackmails others with radiation leaks. Is there any sense to reduce nuclear weapons when Russia is weaponizing nuclear power plants? Scary question.
Nuclear weapons, one thing. The UN has been very adamant about the use of nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons by Russia. President Zelensky said, look, he doesn't even have to deploy nuclear weapons because he's weaponizing nuclear power plants. In what Russia has done in taking over some of those plants inside of Ukraine, we know there has been leak of chemicals and other things into the atmosphere because of the way those Russian forces were occupying those power plants. And so, again, it's an important distinction, I think, that President Zelensky is getting to, that, look, Vladimir Putin is weaponizing a whole host of things in this process. He went on to talk about and accuse specifically Russian President Vladimir Putin of genocide and war crimes, particularly on children.
The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrant for Putin for this crime. And we are trying to get children back home. But time goes by. What will happen with them? What will happen to them? Those children in Russia are taught to hate Ukraine, and all ties with their families are broken. And this is clearly a genocide.
So talking about that kind of genocide and the thousands of children that have been taken inside of Russia and separated from their families, as President Zelensky outlined, that they're being taught to hate Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, this is a form of genocide, and that Vladimir Putin needs to be held accountable. I thought it was very compelling that President Zelensky called on all of those in the assembly to simply live up to the principles they profess to believe. He talked about the fact that they've all signed on to so many different UN documents that protect children, that protect sovereign territory. And yet, because it's Vladimir Putin, everyone seems to be willing to shrug their shoulders and even look away. So next, President Zelensky explained what happens when one other thing is weaponized. And he talked about it in the context of hate and how Vladimir Putin has weaponized it.
When hatred is weaponized against one nation, it never stops there. Each decade, Russia starts a new war. Parts of Moldova and Georgia remain occupied. Russia turned Syria into ruins. And if not Russia, the chemical weapons would have never been used there in Syria. Russia has almost swallowed Belarus. It is obviously threatening Kazakhstan and other Baltic states.
So all of this in a compelling speech at the UN today from President Zelensky. So many important messages. So the first half of his speech was really focused on what Vladimir Putin has weaponized, not just against Ukraine, but against the world. So again, he talked about the weaponization of food and food insecurity, and how the actions of Vladimir Putin have caused not only the Ukrainians to suffer, the Ukrainian economy to suffer, but many in Africa and other places around the world. He also talked about energy and weaponizing the energy that so many nations were dependent on Russia to deliver. He talked about the nuclear power plants, and to me that was one of the most compelling components, was when he talked about how Russia has occupied nuclear power plants, that while the UN has been solely focused on let's make sure that no tactical nuclear weapons will be used, Volodymyr Zelensky says, no, they've already weaponized the power plants, and that's bad enough. He also went on, as we just listened to, the genocide, the kidnapping of children and taking them across the border into Russia, and what is happening there. This is one of those that we're going to stay with the conversation because President Zelensky delivered what I thought was a very compelling, very poignant speech, and we're going to get to the climax of that coming up. Stick around. More Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you, saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Zero Res, no residue carpet cleaning and more. The service is top-notch. The cleaning is amazing. And here's a price you're going to love, too. Schedule today, and you'll pay just $25 per room clean. Other companies say they clean as good as Zero Res, but honestly, it's just not the same. Zero Res has patented technology to ensure you get the best cleaning possible. And yes, those patents mean that no one else is cleaning like this. Carpets, air ducts, tile, furniture, and more. Your whole home can be fresher with a call to Zero Res. Today only. They're cleaning the Wasatch Front for just $25 per room. Minimums and restrictions apply, but there are no maximums. Clean 5 rooms, 6 rooms, clean the whole house. Just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. $25 per room for carpets. And call for special pricing on air duct cleanings too. For more info, restrictions, and to schedule, visit ZeroRes.com. You got it, ZeroRes.com.
This is author Richard Paul Evans. My new book, Michael Vey 9, The Trader, is now on sale everywhere. Pick up your copies today. That's Michael Vey 9, The Trader.
Winter is coming. With snow already in the mountains, full-blown winter will be here before you know it. Hi, this is Josh with IWC Roofing. We're the highest rated roofing contractor in Utah. Now is the time to protect your home by preparing for the upcoming season. Get ready for the winter and protect your home by calling our experts for a free in-home inspection. You need to take advantage of our extended Labor Day special and save $1,200 on a full roof replacement. Call 801-232-5690 or visit iwcroofingutah.com today to schedule your free consultation and save up to $1,200 on your complete roofing project. IWC Roofing offers the best warranty in the business, backed by Owens Corning, and our warranty doesn't prorate down like other roofing companies. Again, call 801-232-5690 or visit iwcroofingutah.com to save that $1,200 on a new roof install. At IWC Roofing, we can install most new roofs in just one day. Call 801-232-5690 or visit iwcroofingutah.com.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, legislative leaders say they're prepared to pay to keep Utah's national parks open, even if there's a government shutdown. Second, the north arm of the Great Salt Lake hasn't recovered like the south arm, but that may not be a big problem. Third, Prince William was in New York City today, but not for the UN General Assembly. Right now, 81 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, we're staying with the question and the conversation taking place at the UN today in New York. Leaders from around the world have convened for the UN General Assembly meetings there in New York. Of course, President Biden spoke earlier today, delivering a speech really focused, as kind of a charm offensive to a lot of those countries in Africa and South America that have been or become very dependent on China for a whole host of things, from belts and roads and bridges to loans for development and investment. So the president gave his speech. I think his is one that you should read. There were some, I think, compelling things from the president there. But we've been focusing in the last half of the show talking about President Zelensky. And I thought a riveting speech delivered in English by the president of Ukraine. And as we outlined in the last segment, he talked by talking about what Russia has weaponized, from food to nuclear power plants to children. And we want to continue with his speech because I think it is so compelling. And in one of the most poignant moments, I thought, in the entire speech, President Zelensky, again, standing in that setting in the UN, which is pretty compelling and pretty amazing when you look at it. But he actually looked out across the UN General Assembly and painted a very clear picture of what happens if Russia and Vladimir Putin's aggression goes unchecked.
And the goal of the present war against Ukraine is to turn our land, our people, our lives, our resources into a weapon against you, against the international rules-based order. Many seats in the General Assembly Hall may become empty if Russia succeeds with its treachery and aggression.
That's a pretty haunting framing there by President Zelensky, saying that one of the things that Vladimir Putin is weaponizing that no one has really been talking about is that Vladimir Putin has been weaponizing the war of Ukraine against all the other UN members. And he very hauntingly said, look, people, if Vladimir Putin goes unchecked in his aggression, he will weaponize the war against Ukraine to go after all of you. He said there would be empty halls in the United Nations building. There would be empty seats in the General Assembly if Vladimir Putin continues to go on unchecked in his aggression, not just towards Ukraine, but what will likely follow. President Zelensky also said that Russia doesn't need nuclear weapons to spread death and destruction. Just look at what they've done inside of Ukraine.
The aggressor scatters deaths and brings ruins even without nukes, but the outcomes are alike. We see towns, we see villages in Ukraine wiped out by Russian artillery, leveled to the ground completely. We see the war of drones. We know the possible effects of spreading the war into the cyberspace. The artificial intelligence could be trained to combat well before it would learn to help the humanity.
So Zelensky also outlined the ways that Ukraine has actually been trying to pursue the pathway to peace in the region. And he actually had some very strong, very pointed words towards those who were either trying to create their own peace talks with Vladimir Putin behind Ukraine's back.
We launched the format of meetings between national security advisors and diplomatic representatives. Important talks and consultations were held in Hiroshima, in Copenhagen, and in Jeddah on the implementation of the peace formula. And we are preparing a global peace summit. And please, I invite all of you who do not tolerate any aggression, to jointly prepare the summit. And I am aware of the attempts to make some shady dealings behind the scenes. Evil cannot be trusted. Ask Prigozhin if one bets on Putin's promises.
That's a pretty stark reminder for President Zelensky to invoke the former Wagner head who is no longer on the planet, if Vladimir Putin and evil can really be trusted even behind closed doors. And I think President Zelensky was really trying to send the message that those of you who are in the halls here of the United Nations having meetings that don't include Ukraine to talk about peace in Ukraine and to somehow possibly carve up Ukraine or to do something that might appease Vladimir Putin enough to stop the war. President Zelensky says, don't even be doing that. Evil's not to be trusted. It has to be done in the light of day. It can't be done in back rooms and behind closed doors. And I thought that was very compelling coming from President Zelensky to say, don't you be negotiating our peace for our country. And he really talked about it in the context several times throughout the course of the speech that, look, this is a chance to do it differently. He said in history, often the country or the people who are being attacked end up losing in the end. They're the ones who make the concessions to get to peace. And so we end up rewarding bad behavior. And why should we be surprised when bad behavior gets repeated? Because we reward it. We've talked many times on this show about the fact that, particularly in European wars, usually when you get to the negotiating table, negotiating for peace, whatever land you have at the time, you usually end up keeping. And so if that were to be the case this time around, clearly Russia has some pretty significant chunks of Ukraine. Should they be rewarded by keeping those as part of a peacekeeping effort? There's a very different process that we have to get to. Finally, in his closing remarks, President Zelensky did call for unity in the face of Russian aggression and what that actually means to the world.
Please hear me. Let unity decide everything openly. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation. Weaponization must be restrained. War crimes must be punished. Deported people must come back home. And the occupier must return to their own land. We must be united to make it, and we will do it. Slava Ukraini.
And that was the end of President Zelensky's remarks at the UN General Assembly today in New York. Of course, he was a little bit after President Biden had delivered his